Hello, it's Alex and welcome to Hey Little Thrifter. I'm back with another Nightmare Queens video where I talk about vintage horror from the 1970s, 80s and 90s written by women, and today I'm going to be talking about Ghost House by Clare McNally. Ghost House by Clare McNally was originally published in 1980 and it was her debut novel. And this is about the Van Buren family, a husband and wife and their 3 young children. They have moved out of the city and into an old large house in a small town on the coast. So we have husband Gary, wife Melanie and the children Nancy, Gina and Kyle, and they are all pretty excited to be moving into this place and the change of pace they are going to have from city living that they're used to. But the reason for them moving isn't particularly a happy one. The relationship between Gary and Melanie is actually very strained, and Melanie had recently had an affair with another man. Melanie ended the affair, but there is a rift between the couple and is one of the reasons that they have packed up and moved. And as they are settling into their new home and trying to get their relationship back and get settled in and kind of start afresh, but there are some strange things going on in the house that they start to experience, and of course they brush them off as, you know, being explained in some way or another, and don't want to entertain the idea of the supernatural as being the cause of these problems. One thing I thought was interesting in the setup of this story is the affair that Melanie had kind of has a cause and effect for certain things that play out in the story. So one, it is a reason for the family moving to this old house. Another is that before they moved, the man Melanie had an affair with ended up getting very threatening towards her and her family, and so one of the causes for the strange things that have happened in the house that they think of is that maybe this guy has actually tracked them down and is somehow hiding in the house and causing all of these problems for them. And another thing is that it is a reason for the strained relationship between Gary and Melanie, and one of the reasons why there is lack of communication and miscommunication between the two of them, and even though they're both experiencing these weird goings on, they are finding it difficult to talk to each other anyway. So yeah, it's very difficult for them to actually have a proper conversation about these things that are happening to them in the new house. So I thought that was quite an interesting setup and chain of events. I think unfortunately for me, the things that let this book down a bit were this lack of communication between the two of them. Even though I could see the reason behind it, it did get very frustrating, the fact that they wouldn't just properly talk to each other and figure out what was going on a lot sooner. And I did find that some of the dialogue felt very stiff and unnatural, and not all of it, but there were definitely parts of it that just didn't feel like believable things that people would really say. Another thing that didn't quite work for me here were the main characters of Gary and Melanie. Neither of them are particularly sympathetic or likeable characters, and Not that that is a necessity, but they also just weren't very interesting either, unfortunately. They were just there and they didn't really have much substance to them, so I didn't really get too invested in their story. And another thing is, and I don't mean this to be just a string of negative things to say about this book, because overall I did enjoy it, but some of the things that happen in here were just way too silly or ridiculous and overdramatic that I just didn't find them to be believable, so I didn't really find there was much tension or atmosphere, because I was kind of taken out of the story in having a hard time believing in it. And that brings me on to another point, in that you can definitely tell that this book came out in the wake of the Amityville Horror. It takes a lot of those ideas and tropes and just kind of rehashes them, so it did feel very predictable in that sense. That said, I did still enjoy this one. It was a pretty quick read, and even though I rolled my eyes at certain things, it was definitely a page turner. There are an array of characters in addition to the Van Buren family. So there is a lady that Melanie meets at the library, there are some policemen, detectives, there is an elderly lady who lives very close to them and has seen other things happen in this house over the years. And yeah, I know I said some of the things that go on here were a bit too silly for my liking. Just as an example, the wife, Melanie, has a couple of experiences where in the darkness, you know, someone touches her and things develop into something romantic or sexual in nature, and she just assumes it's her husband, even though there are differences to what she expects from him. And also, this guy has a British accent, which her husband does not. But she just goes along with it anyway, doesn't really think too much about it. She's like, I must have just misheard. So yeah, things like that were very silly, but there were some effective things going on here as well. The supernatural element of the story does create a lot of violent things to happen in the house. Most of the family, in fact, end up getting caught up in some violent act of one sort or another. So it's, definitely some high stakes stuff. It's not just feeling a creepy breeze or something. There is, kind of high stakes here and real harm coming to these people. And another scene I quite liked, without going into like super spoilery detail, but the oldest daughter, Gina, who is turning 13, she ends up having a sleepover with some friends, and there were some crazy things that happen at this sleepover with all of these teenage girls, which just ended up being quite a fun and crazy scene. And another big part of the book to talk about is what exactly is going on in this house. And we do get, right at the beginning of the book, we have a prologue from 1797, and there is a man who is watching the aftermath of a witch burning, and this person who has been killed by the townsfolk is someone very dear to him, so he is distraught over the loss of this person and the fact that she could have been accused as a witch and then killed because of it. So this is the, crux of the strange goings on in this house. If you don't want to hear any more about that element, then I guess you can skip ahead or click out of the video entirely. But yeah, we do learn more as the story goes on about who this man is. And yes, it's the guy with the British accent, and he was in love with this woman who was burned as a witch, and he has haunted this house ever since. And any woman who lives there, he believes is the woman he was in love with. and anyone else who is there, the other family members, he sees as a threat and is intent on killing them. So as the story goes on, we do learn about other instances where families have moved into this house and things have gone horribly wrong for them, and people have been killed, and the house has then sat abandoned for some time before another unsuspecting family comes along and moves in and falls victim to the ghost that is haunting the place. So this was a bit of a mixed bag of a read for me. There were some things that didn't really work for me, unfortunately, but some things that I did like, and once I had read the book and am able to view it as a whole, I did think it had some interesting elements going on in there. I just feel maybe it's the fact that it was her debut novel, it was just a little bit kind of rough around the edges, but yeah, like I say, it was still a page turner, it was still a fun read, and I am glad I read it. I ended up rating this one 3 stars, and I have read one other Clare McNally book, which was Somebody Come and Play, which was another supernatural story, and that one was also a 3-star read for me, which, you know, is a good read. It's maybe not the best book in the world, but it was still good and enjoyable, and I would absolutely read more of her work. I know she has several books out, so I would definitely pick up more of her work at some point. In fact, there is a sequel to this book called Ghost House Revenge, and while I did think the ending of the book was, again, a little silly, a bit too ridiculous for me to really get on board with and kind of suspend disbelief, but I did think the actual kind of final ending of the book and the way it left it open for a sequel was pretty well done, so I liked that element of it as well. So yeah, those were my thoughts on Ghost House by Clare McNally. Let me know if you've read this one, I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you ever so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!